As bizarre as it may sound, even by Donald Trump's standards, here is a key question in the race to be his running mate. Is shooting your puppy in the face disqualifying? Reports vary about why contender Kristi Noem put that story in her new book. One theory is to head off a disclosure by someone else. Another, to make her out as battle ready. She frames it as an example of leaders having to make tough choices. And the entire process is amping up speculation about the race to be Trump's number two, while also amping up the jokes.
Age is the only thing we have in common. My vice president actually endorses me.
While Trump has suggested he'll wait until close to the convention to make his selection, a key moment may be next month when many of the top contenders are expected to join Trump at a fundraising retreat in Florida. Here to break it all down, NBC chief political analyst Chuck Todd and the Bulwark's Tim Miller, also an MSNBC political analyst. Oh, Chuck, Kristi Noem is defending herself, and this is what she wrote on X. The fact is, South Dakota law states that dogs who attack and kill livestock can be put down. Given that Cricket is her dog, had shown aggressive behavior toward people by biting them, I decided what I did. Whether running the ranch or in politics, I have never passed on my responsibilities to anyone else to handle. What does this mean for her within the Republican Party and any chances she has to be VP?
Well, look, I thought she was sort of eliminated after the weird personal endorsement of the dental facility in the state of Texas when she talked about fixing her smile, and there was that public service announcement that she did, and you're just going, boy, does it end? And then you keep going, you realize, oh my gosh, she's still talking, and she's still talking, and she's still talking. So I can't imagine. Now, I'm always a little afraid to assume anything with the Trump world, because you just never know what he's thinking, right? Just because what would seem like a bad idea, nominating somebody who shoots dogs, for all we know, just one person has to think, why not, or anything like that. But I would be surprised. Look, one thing about Trump is he's not going to pick somebody that he thinks is going to get more attention than he is, let alone bad attention. I think that the speculation about Doug Burgum it certainly fits what I'd been hearing, which is he's looking for a quiet, rich person. He'd love somebody to help fund his campaign, and a vice presidential running mate can write a heck of a lot more money to a campaign than simply a governor of North Dakota.
Here's the problem, though, because like Noem in South Dakota, besides her other problems, Elise Stefanik, say, in New York, these are not battleground states. Might he want someone who actually comes from a place where they could help him potentially? A Tim Scott, a Marco Rubio?
Well, I certainly think that is what some in Trump world have thought, that, for instance, Tim Scott can help with suburban folks, at least the thinking goes. But even Trump, and we've heard this, that he thinks that Scott's position on abortion and, frankly, his inability to handle. I mean, one could argue Tim Scott's presidential campaign, it never really got off the ground. But the week he tried to get it off the ground, he couldn't, because he just couldn't answer it took him 6 or 7 different tries to answer where was he on a federal abortion ban. 15 weeks, not 15 weeks. Is he personally supported? He just had a mess, and he did not show an ability to do it. So I think in conventional terms, if you're Trump and you think you have somebody that can carry you, to me, it's a 2-state election if you're Trump. If you think there's one person that can help you carry Wisconsin and or Michigan, you go grab that person. And perhaps he thinks, well, Burgum's kind of Midwestern. Maybe he'll have some ability there. But, I ultimately think we overrate the running mate talk. I mean, just look at our past. How many successful nominees had overcame bad running mates, and how many losing nominees had terrific running mates? So I kind of think we overrate this a bit.
All right, but we're going to still talk about it. So, Tim, I want to go back to Kristi Noem for a second, because when I was at the White House Correspondents' Dinner this weekend, everybody was talking about this, and the Lincoln Project, no surprise, seized on it with a new ad. Take a listen.
Dog owners know our furry friends can be a lot to keep up with. But when those tough moments come, you have options. shooting your dog in the face should not be one of them.
There are a lot of dog lovers out there. Donald Trump may not be one of them, Tim, but he hasn't said anything that I know of about Nome yet. Do you want to wait to see how it all shakes out? Is it a sign it's a bad move? Do you think he'll say anything at all? Because this is something, for better, for worse, people are talking about it everywhere for obvious reasons.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you bringing me in, but I'm not sure you need someone with expertise to tell you that shooting a dog is not really a winner in politics. But I'm happy to bring that expertise to the program. What will Trump do? Look, Trump right now, I think, is really enjoying the Veep stakes in a lot of ways. It's very similar to, when he ran the Miss Universe pageant. He wants people to suck up to him. He wants to tease people. It's similar to The Apprentice, too. He wants to tease people about who might be in the lead, who might be losing. He gets a kick out of this kind of stuff. So that's just the type of person that he is. So I doubt he'll trash Noam over this because, he wants these people all to be vying for his love and attention. I'm with Chuck, though. I never thought that she never seemed to me to be the type of person he would pick. He wants someone that looks the part. He wants someone that's going to be unflinchingly loyal. Those seem like the top two considerations for him. Maybe the money thing could be a bonus, as Chuck brought out. She doesn't really, I don't think, fit those things. I think some other, the scandals related to her relationship with Corey Lewandowski and kind of what was happening with campaign finance reform, campaign finance, related to that, I think also hurts her. I just don't think it's probably going to be Kristi Noem, and I doubt Donald Trump weighs in on Doggate. But again, who knows? Maybe he's bored. He's been bored leading in court, so he might just need to get something off his chest.